Hi, this is Ben Caspit, Al Monitor's correspondent in Israel. Welcome to our first chapter of the brand new podcast on Israel, in which we will try to make a relative order in the Israeli chaos. And today, we made history in Jerusalem. So let's go. Hall number 317 on the third floor of Jerusalem's district court has the honor 5 years ago of hosting Israel's former Prime Minister, Ehud Olmert, who stood and heard himself being convicted on various counts of corruption for which he had been tried. Olmert was sent to prison. Today, the same location played host to Olmert's here, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the man who broke Ben-Gurion's immortal record for the longest term in office and is now entering history with the less flattering title of the first incumbent prime minister to be tried on 3 counts of indictment: cheating, bribery, and breach of trust. Netanyahu, it appears, inherited from Olmert not only the prime minister's office and the official residence of Balfour Street, but also the very same courtroom in which Olmert was tried. I was there today at the historic moment. More than 4 years after the investigation began against Netanyahu, the moment has finally arrived, the moment he had feared more than anything else. The moment he has been trying to evade using every trick in the book and few others that aren't written anywhere. The moment when an Israeli prime minister will chair a government session in the morning and spend the afternoon facing 3 judges. I was hoping that Netanyahu will internalize his position at the last moment and lower his eyes, one way or another, before the Israeli judicial system. That hope has been proven wrong. In his efforts to escape from justice this morning, Netanyahu tried to drag half the Israeli public into the courtroom with him. He has no compunction about tearing the nation apart and placing one half in the defendant's dock with him. Almost 59 years ago, Jerusalem saw the opening of the trial of Nazi criminal Adolf Eichmann. The prosecutor at that trial was Gideon Hausner, who opened with a speech that would go down in history. In this place in which I stand before you, judges of Israel, to prosecute Adolf Eichmann, I stand not alone. With me, at this moment in time, I am joined by 6 million prosecutors. Hausner, of course, was referring to the many millions of people murdered in the Holocaust of the Jews of Europe. Almost 60 years later, some of Netanyahu's supporters are using the same rhetoric. And Netanyahu does nothing to contradict them, make no attempt to reject out of hand this comparison, and does not try to dampen the already heated atmosphere. On the contrary, he is trying to split the public and turn the court and his trial into a political show trial, even when he is totally aware of the potentially fatal, if not irreversible harm that this could cause the state of Israel. And it's this trial that is of special concern to so many Israelis on this historic and so sad day. Netanyahu's trial opens almost in parallel with the launch of his 5th government, the first government in which he is not the sole ruler, but shares the leadership with former military chief of staff Benny Gantz. Netanyahu hopes to make his stamp on Israel's history via the highly controversial annexation, applying Israeli sovereignty on all parts of the Israeli settlements in Judea and Samaria. He has yet to work hard on this, vis-à-vis the skepticism of Gantz and Ashkenazi, the growing fears within Trump administration in Washington, and warnings from King Abdullah of Jordan, as well as threats from Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah. At the same time, Netanyahu continues to oversee Israel's war against the COVID-19 virus and Israel's efforts against Iran, especially with regards to its defeat in Syria. All these are resting on the shoulders of one man who this morning has also become an indicted criminal. Just before 3 o'clock, the thousands of people were filling the area opposite the district court on East Jerusalem's Salah ad-Din Street. They were there to protest against the legal system, the prosecution, the police, attorney general, and anyone else who dares raise a hand against their beloved leader. Dozens of media teams from around the globe are filling all the openings, clamoring to get what should be one of the most historic pictures of the decade, the picture of Benjamin Netanyahu on the defendant's bench. Only the day after will the test of Netanyahu's trial be evident. Whether he is indicted, whether he comes out a Dreyfus or a common criminal, whether Israel can heal the wounds and move forward. Will someone be wise enough to step on the brakes before all the red lines are crossed? I'm not ashamed to admit that over the years I was unable to believe that a picture of a prime minister ruling a country with one hand and criminal proceedings with the other is feasible in Israel of 2020. It does not appear logical, it is not right, it is not done, but it's legal. Netanyahu's genius lies in the way he planted this situation in the awareness of millions of Israelis. At least half of them view him as a latter-day Superman capable of simultaneously managing several crises and countries. Netanyahu's test will be whether or not he will wake up in time to halt the ever-growing rift, the civil war that is gathering momentum behind the scenes, before it all gets out of hand. The answer to these questions will emerge over the next few months. Netanyahu arrived unusually early, surrounded by government ministers and Knesset members who came to demonstrate solidarity. He took his place at the bottom of the courthouse stairs in the style of Dreyfus. For a long time, Netanyahu fired a crude barrage of words at the police, the prosecution, and all those who, according to him, conspired against him to stitch him up. When he finished, he went up to the third floor in the courthouse to room 317, when order was restored. Now, he is no longer the accuser, but the accused. He is no longer the prosecutor, but the prosecuted. At 10 minutes past 3 o'clock, the judges entered, headed by President Rivka Friedman-Feldman, and Netanyahu stood up. 3 minutes later, the president turned to him. He straightened. She asked him if he had read and understood the indictment. He said he had. This was the moment when the new rules were written. The arena in which Netanyahu now found himself is not the one over which he rules. Fiery speeches, demonstrations of support, and threats won't influence her. In this arena, Netanyahu is not the ruler, but the ruled. The time has gone for justice. We'll stop here for a brief commercial break, immediately after which we'll welcome the first guest on podcast on Israel, former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Olmert.
If you're listening to this podcast, you obviously care about the Middle East, and if you do, you should probably be reading El Monitor. El Monitor is a global newsroom headquartered in Washington, D.C., with a network of over 160 contributors around the world. El Monitor offers first-class reporting and analysis from a range of perspectives and an approach that represents the highest journalistic standards, as well as an award-winning commitment to press freedom and independence. If you haven't done so already, visit us at elmonitor.com, check out our articles, and sign up for our free newsletters. There's a lot to choose from, including the Week in Review, an essay that offers unusual insights and forecasts into the region based upon El Monitor's outstanding reporting. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe to our El Monitor podcast on your favorite podcast platform, on Israel with Ben Caspit, and on the Middle East with me, Andrew Parasolidi.
Our guest today is not suited for a day like this. Former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, Netanyahu's predecessor, one of the two Israeli prime ministers still with us, apart from Netanyahu. Olmert was there and got through what Netanyahu went through today. in exactly the same courtroom. He was tried for a number of crimes. He was acquitted on some, convicted for some after an appeal by the state, and now he's one of the most harshest Netanyahu's critics in Israel. Olmert is Israel's 12th prime minister, and before that, he was the mayor of the city of Jerusalem. He knows Netanyahu very well, and he was his political partner and his political adversary for many years. He is very familiar with Israel, Israeli society, and the Israeli judiciary system. Shalom, Mr. Olmert. Thank you very much for agreeing to be our first guest on Israel podcast.
Thank you very much, Ben, and I appreciate the introduction. I just want to make one, if I may, one small but not insignificant correction. I was never in the same position as Netanyahu because I was never indicted as a prime minister.
Yes, of course.
Long before any indictment, the very initial stage of the investigation, I figured out that I may find myself in a position where, as prime minister, I'm fighting against the courts, the prosecutor general, the attorney general, the police, the investigators, and all of this. And while I thought that I was completely innocent, I figured out that I'd better resign, which I did at a very early stage. So Netanyahu is the first and the only prime minister, reigning prime minister. At the time that he is prime minister, he is indicted and he's sitting in the court room, which I was not subject to.
And I have a special question about this later on, but let us start, Mr. Olmert, in the question, how would you define today, an important day, a sad day, a dangerous day, a day of hope or the desperation?
Well, it definitely is a sad day. You know, no one wants that the most important person in the country, the prime minister, will be indicted, particularly because he was indicted, again, unlike me, is indicted only for crimes that allegedly, yes, that were committed in his capacity as prime minister at the time that he was prime minister, and for personal benefits that were very useful and beneficial to him. So definitely this is a sad day. No one dreamt of it, no one wanted it. At the same time, it was also a dangerous day. It's a dangerous day because, unfortunately, I think the prime minister chose to challenge the entire systems, the police, and he was accusing the former Inspector General of Police for committing crimes, in precisely the same way that he argues that he has been subject to. But that's what he said today against the former Inspector General, who is, by the way, known to be a right-wing person and a settler in the past and so on. So it was very, very, it was devastating and very depressing. Also, he was accusing the prosecutor and the attorney general for actually framing him. Now, everyone that is indicted is unhappy about it and can complain. But when you are prime minister and you stand in front of the cameras, surrounded by the most senior ministers in the cabinet, in the entrance to the court, and you accuse the attorney general, the police, the inspector general, all the law enforcing agencies of framing you, and actually you try to intimidate the court with a demonstration of hundreds of people that were brought in with buses. I think that this is a very, very uncomfortable, to put it mildly. But at the same time, I think that it shows something about the strength of the Israeli democracy. The fact is that, in spite of the fact that he is prime minister and an incumbent, yes, he is still brought to court, and he has to face the prosecutors. And I think that it shows that Israel is a strong democracy, and I hope that all the efforts made in order to intimidate the prosecution or the court will be unsuccessful.
Do you really think it's a sign of strength? Because we can count our all the predecessors. We already had a president in jail, an ex-prime minister, yourself in jail, a minister of treasury in jail, minister of interior in jail, and many, many others. Is it strength or weakness? Is Israel a corrupt state?
Oh, not at all. Listen, if you we are broadcasting, I think, amongst other places to America, you find out how many speakers and senators and congressmen were forced to leave their position because of, similar situations. So Israel is not the only country, and I think that while, of course, sometimes there are failures, at the same time, the fact that the law enforcing agencies are strong enough to be able to enforce the law is ultimately the show of strength. And I hope that there will not be, this balance will not be changed by the somewhat extraordinary and aggressive measures that the Prime Minister is taking now in order to save himself.
Let's talk a little about emotions. You know Netanyahu for decades. You were very close to him from time to time. What do you think went through his mind and stomach today when he stood downstairs on opposite the court hall and with his very brutal speech against the system, and then a few minutes later, when he was standing up, when the judges came in and looked at his judges and maybe understood that he is not the controller here in this room?
Well, again, I hope you will forgive me if I'll say that I never really was close to him. I never considered myself a friend of his, and I wasn't. I must say, quite honestly, I think he's a very capable person, but in some ways. But I was never overly impressed with him. I think that Netanyahu is first and foremost a communicator. I mean, he's an outstanding communicator. He is actually an actor. I think he could do a great career in Broadway, which he may have done had he not left America and returned back to Israel, because he lived a very major part of his life. He lived in America until the age of well over 30. Although he served in the army in a very combatant and prestigious unit, so that has to be remembered and given to his credit. So I was never really close to him, and I was not very impressed with him, and I think that he is not a strong man. I'll tell you something. A strong man doesn't need to do what he did today. Only a man who is utterly threatened and frightened can stand up and say, I will destroy you. You are a thief. You are a criminal. You are a gangster. The head of police, the head of the prosecution, threatens the court, having all his ministers coming to embrace him from all sides. A strong man doesn't need it. A strong man can stand in front of the cameras, which he would have done, which he would have been forced to anyway because of his position, and say quietly and modestly and humbly, I'm innocent. I will prove it in court, because he will have to prove it in court if he is innocent. I don't know, by the way, if he's not or if he is. We will see. We'll find out through the process. And I think that would have made a much greater impact on his constituents. So I think that his performance today was out of fear and weakness, not a show of strength. I think that therefore, when he faced the the judges, when they enter the court room, I think that he felt very, very lonely. Only a lonely person need to bring in so many people to make him feel that he is not.
After having said all that, how can you explain to me or to yourself or to the public or to our listeners that since the second campaign in September 19 to the last campaign on the March, he gained strength. He's very popular, maybe in his the peak of popularity ever, with these charges in court.
But I think we have to put things in a more realistic proportion. Number one, the Likud under Netanyahu never reached the heights of the Likud of Arik Sharon, of Yitzhak Shamir, and of Menachem Begin. I ran, by the way, against Netanyahu, and this was his greatest defeat ever. He got only 12 mandates at the time that he ran against me, and I won 29. But Arik Sharon, when he ran for elections, got 38 mandates. Shamir got 40 and 41, Begin 48. So at the first place, Netanyahu never got as much support as his predecessors in Likud. I was the head of Kadima, not the head of Likud. Number two, the gains of Netanyahu were at the expense of his partners from the right-wing sections of the political bodies. So while as Likud he got more mandates, but his partners lost their mandates. So the truth is that even at the third election in March, his bloc wouldn't allow him to form a cabinet. We all know it. What happened is that the opposition or the other side that was challenging him appeared to have been very weak. I mean, the personalities, the leaders were very weak, and some defected. Some members of Blue and White defected, and of the Labour Party defected, and that's what allowed him to form, and eventually the Blue and White joined in. But the outcome of the elections would not allow him to form a coalition. Actually, what happened is that he ran 3 times in the last year, from April 2019 to March 2020, and the 3 election campaigns, he didn't get enough support to allow him to form a coalition under normal circumstances. Had it not been for the coronavirus, he would have never formed a coalition in the first place. So I think the coronavirus may have been a pandemic and caused some turmoil and some discomfort in the country. But as far as Netanyahu is concerned, I think he thanks the virus every morning.
Final question, Mr. Olmert, about the trial. Do you think that this trial will continue to the end until a ruling is given? Or can we expect a plea bargain somewhere down the line?
No, I don't think that he is made to make a plea bargain. It's not upon him to decide anyway. He is not the decision maker. The decision makers in his family are his wife and his elder child, and they dictate what's going on. So, and I think that they already discussed this issue several times. That's what I heard from close sources, and they made it clear that he will not. There can be a plea bargain only if he admits in some of the articles of the indictment, and that will necessarily disqualify him for any public position forever. And also, it will have to include a certain period of a jail period. So I don't think that he will go for a plea bargain. And I don't know to say, one goes for a plea bargain only if he feels absolutely convinced that he's going to be convicted. And I think that in his state of mind, the way he's built and the atmosphere around him is such that it's not likely that he feels that he feels that he will win the case in court. And who knows? I don't know. I'm not familiar with the details to the extent that I can pass a judgment about the chances, what will happen in the court process. Although I think that it looks to me that, when all was said and done, the chances that he will be convicted are much higher than that he will be acquitted.
Can you imagine him going to jail?
I can imagine him going to jail. Why not? If he will be indicted, based on the past of Israel, you're talking to someone that has experienced it.
Mr. Olmert, is it all possible?
By the way, there is one thing which is entirely different from what I had to face with him. All the allegations against me on the first place, and then my indictment, and then my conviction, related to a period years and years and years before I became prime minister, and nothing to do with my performance as prime minister. My performance as prime minister, which was investigated entirely from top to bottom, 10 times, 20 times, was found completely clear of any wrongdoing. Everything that he is indicted for is something that he has committed using the powers of a prime ministership for his own personal benefit.
All right, I'm moving to politics. And I want to ask you if you believe that the Gantz-Netanyahu government will complete its term and remain in office for 3 or maybe more years, and if not, how is it going to end, this romance?
It will collapse. Don't ask me now exactly what will be the circumstances. I don't know. It depends. In most of the political crises that I've been through, in more than 36 years in the center stage of Israeli politics, at the end, the crisis that brought down the government and which forced early elections was always something that was unexpected and which was unanticipated. So I'm not in a position to say now what exactly will cause it. It may be something that one of the minor ministers will do, which will touch a very sensitive nerve that will shake the stability of the government, will cause its collapse. I don't know, but I feel, based on my experience in Israeli politics, I don't think there is anyone that has been through for so many years as I did. I served 9 times. I was elected 9 times to the Knesset, and in addition to be 2 terms mayor of the city of Jerusalem. I feel that it will collapse much earlier than most people think.
But this coalition agreement is unique. We never saw something like this with 2 prime ministers, and they already voted to everything. They even swore in Benny Gantz to his term as prime minister on November 2021. So it's like an automatic pilot. If Netanyahu will pull us to election, Benny Gantz is becoming automatically prime minister.
Yeah, but so what? This is what I think Gantz could have accomplished had he not surrendered at the very last minute. He could have created it had he had a little bit more stamina and a little bit more experience, which unfortunately he doesn't. But look, this combination of 16 members of Knesset having 16 ministerial positions against a bloc of 59, which has the same number of ministers. I mean, this is absolutely crazy. This is absolutely insane. And I don't think that it will last. I don't think that it will work. At the end, something will happen. And as I said before, I wish I could tell you what will be the circumstances. I don't know. But it will not stay. It will not prevail.
The most intriguing question today to ask Mr. Olmert is this. According to their coalition agreement, on July 1st, Netanyahu can present a proposal to annex the Jewish settlement in Judea and Samaria and the Jordan Valley. In your position, in your opinion, will he do this? Will he do this?
Number one, I think that if he will try to do it, and if he will succeed, which I doubt very much, it will be a disaster to Israel. Already the intention to do it is a major stumbling block for the state of Israel, not for the government only, for the state. I think that America will not agree. I think that the statement that was made by Joe Biden, who is, is having his chances of being president. I don't know if he will be elected. I don't want to go into American politics. I'm not sure that I know enough at the present time to be able to pass an observation about what the chances are for the president or Joe Biden. But the fact that the Democratic Party will be completely against it, all of Europe will be completely against it. Jordan already threatened that it will will depart from the peace agreement, and Egypt may follow up. It can cause, and the most important thing, the one which I think is very important for the friends of Israel that may listen to us to understand, there is not. I consider myself to be, quite familiar with all the needs of Israel's security. And being a former prime minister and being involved with every aspect of our security and security needs and threats and difficulties, but there is not one single expert, one single former general, chief of staff, or head of secret service, head of Mossad, anyone that do not share this observation of mine, that making a unilateral annexation of any part of the West Bank, the settlements or the Jordan Valley, will be a disaster for Israel and for Israel's security. And therefore, I hope that it will be prevented. And I think that Netanyahu is a big talker, but according to Netanyahu, he would have destroyed Iran almost 10 years ago, which he didn't, of course. And in the same time, Iran penetrated Syria, and he doesn't have the guts or the concept or the plan of how to get rid of them in Syria. He threatened the annihilation of Hamas in Gaza, which he never did, never tried to do seriously. So I think there is much ado, and I hope about very little. I hope.
I want to go back finally to the situation, to the current situation, and to ask you, is it at all possible to lead a country like Israel at the same time as handling a criminal trial? You did both things, but not on the same time.
You say, if I did? No.
No, is it possible to do right now? He's the sitting prime minister, and he's accused in
the way he's handling himself now, it can be done because he has created the most bizarre government that there is in the world, where a coalition of, on a parity basis, of 16 members against 59, with alternate prime minister that has been sworn in at the same time that he was sworn in, only because the alternate prime minister doesn't believe a word of him, and he thinks that only in this way he may have guaranteed the fulfillment of Netanyahu's commitment. So I think that to run a government, I couldn't agree. I couldn't understand. This is beyond comprehension. I understand that they wanted to make a parity government because otherwise 16 members against 59 is ridiculous for the 16 members to give Netanyahu the position of prime minister that he wouldn't obtain otherwise, only in order to become a junior partner, wouldn't be reasonable, particularly against the background of their accusations against him and the very bitter political campaigns that they ran against him. So, but why couldn't they make it parity on the basis of, say, 18 ministers? They have 34 ministers, 16 deputy ministers. This is not only the largest government in the history of the state of Israel, the largest cabinet, but I'll tell you something. A cabinet is an executive body. I know, I ran a government. I was in charge of the government. I had a cabinet. It's an executive body. No way that you can operate a body of 34 ministers and or maybe 36 at the end, and 16 deputy ministers as an executive, effective, working body. It's impossible. So it is possible only as a framework for his continued position as prime minister in order to help him. So he hopes in his court case, nothing else. But I don't have any expectations that this government will do anything of substance and of significance that will make a difference in the quality of life of Israel, in the social life, in the economic life, or in the security. And quite frankly, I think that there is a major economic crisis now because of the coronavirus, and the fact that there are 26.7% unemployment is something that will come to haunt Netanyahu much earlier than he thinks, and will be directly or indirectly the cause of the collapse of his government.
So, Olmert, my last question is, you've mentioned several times recently that the Netanyahu age or era is over. Do you still think so?
Yeah, I think so. Unfortunately, this process is much slower than it should be, but it's inevitable. He is done. The only question is what will be the price that we pay before he's gone? But he's done. There is no doubt about it.
Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, I want to thank you very much for agreeing to be the first ever guest of On Israel, Al Monitor's brand new podcast. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. All the best to you.
And we are breaking to a short commercial break. We'll be back soon with some closing thoughts.
If you're listening to this podcast, you obviously care about the Middle East, and if you do, you should probably be reading Al Monitor. Al Monitor is a global newsroom headquartered in Washington, D.C., with a network of over 160 contributors around the world. Al Monitor offers first-class reporting and analysis from a range of perspectives and an approach that represents the highest journalistic standards, as well as an award-winning commitment to press freedom and independence. If you haven't done so already, visit us at almonitor.com, check out our articles, and sign up for our free newsletters. There's a lot to choose from, including the Week in Review, an essay that offers unusual insights and forecasts into the region based upon Al Monitor's outstanding reporting. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe to our Al Monitor podcast on your favorite podcast platform, On Israel with Ben Caspit, and On the Middle East with me, Andrew Parasolidi.
So it was another day in the chaotic chronicles of the democracy that is the State of Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu broke the record of the state's founder, David Ben-Gurion, for the length of time in office, has now become the first prime minister to stand trial while still on the job. Israeli society has never been so divided and disconnected. These are not the ordinary tribes that we know on the political right and left, religious and secular, and all that jazz. Israel is now divided into pro-Bibi and anti-Bibi, torn apart into two bleeding rags, hoping for some kind of miracle that will allow it to move forward, to heal the wounds, and to get out of this crisis and somehow get back on its feet. Thank you for listening, and we'll meet again next week in the second installment of On Israel, Al Monitor's new podcast. That's all for now. Take care.